The chase for validation has gotten so common that most men don't even realize they're bleeding out from it. You can see it everywhere. Men chasing attention through achievement, status, aesthetics, money, charm, constant availability, constant output, as if being noticed will finally shut down the restless noise inside. At first, it feels like progress. You work harder, you dress better, you sharpen your social skills, you learn what to say, you learn what not to say. You become more adaptable, more presentable, more valuable on paper. But underneath all that motion, something starts to weaken. The more you reach outward for approval, the more you drift away from your own center. And here's the cruel part: it never satisfies you. It escalates. Compliments wear off. Attraction feels temporary. Respect feels conditional. The peace you were trying to earn becomes something you can lose at any moment. What you thought would fill you slowly hollows you out. This is the contradiction a lot of men live in. The world trains you to project strength before you build it. You're taught how to look confident long before you learn what stability actually feels like. You learn performance before foundation. So your confidence becomes something you maintain, not something you own. And that makes attraction loud and exhausting. You're always recalibrating, always monitoring reactions, always adjusting, always trying to keep the attention from slipping away. And the moment you stop performing, the room goes quiet. The messages slow down. The energy changes. The approval evaporates. That cycle is draining because it was never sustainable. It's not real magnetism. It's a rental. And you're paying for it with your nervous system. Real magnetism doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hustle for attention. It doesn't fight to be seen. It's felt before it's understood. It shows up when a man no longer needs the room to agree with him in order to stand comfortably inside himself. When approval becomes optional, not necessary. When he can be overlooked without shrinking and respected without inflating. That kind of presence is quiet, grounded, unhurried. And when you stop leaning outward for validation, something changes in a way most men don't expect. Your energy stabilizes. Your reactions slow down. Your words carry weight because they aren't bargaining chips anymore. You're no longer using conversation to secure value. You're using it to express it. What people call charisma is often just emotional self-containment. A man who is internally sufficient doesn't rush to impress, explain, or secure outcomes. He engages because he chooses to, not because he needs to be chosen. That distinction changes everything. People can feel when they're being pulled into someone's emptiness versus invited into someone's fullness. One feels heavy, the other feels rare. That's why attraction rooted in self-sufficiency feels different. It doesn't spike and crash. It doesn't depend on constant reassurance. It grows steadily, quietly, until it becomes undeniable. And here's the paradox that will bother your ego until you accept it. The less you need to be seen, the more clearly people start noticing you. Not because you demand attention, but because your presence no longer leaks need. So if you want to build that kind of magnetism, you have to understand what self-sufficiency actually is. Not the internet version, not the act cold version, not the don't care performance, the real thing. Because self-sufficiency is what ends the exhausting chase. It's what turns attraction from something you manage into something that naturally forms around you. Let's define it clearly. Self-sufficiency is not emotional distance. It's not isolation. It's not social withdrawal. It's not pretending you don't care. Self-sufficiency is being able to want connection without needing it to feel stable. It means companionship is an addition to your life, not the foundation of your emotional state. It means your inner world isn't held hostage by someone else's mood, attention, or availability. It means you can enjoy closeness without becoming dependent on it. And the key ingredient at the center of real self sufficiency is emotional regulation, not emotional suppression, not forcing yourself to be numb. Regulation means you can experience your emotions without being ruled by them. You can feel disappointment without panicking. You can feel desire without chasing. You can feel loss without collapsing. You can feel rejection without turning it into an identity crisis. That's not cold. That's competence. Most men were never trained to carry their own emotional weight. They were trained to either hide it or outsource it. They seek soothing through attention. They seek worth through reactions. They seek stability through being wanted. But when your stability comes from being wanted, you'll always be at war. Because attention fluctuates, people fluctuate, mood fluctuates, availability fluctuates. And if your peace depends on what fluctuates, you will never be peaceful. Self-sufficient men do something different. They build a baseline. Their stability becomes their default, not a reward. And once your baseline is stable, purpose becomes the next pillar. Because a man with no mission will aim his entire identity at being desired. He'll make women the center of his day. He'll make attention the scoreboard. He'll make relationships the proof that he matters. But a man who is building something real doesn't have to use desire as his identity. His days are shaped by intention, not by waiting. His focus is already anchored. His energy is already directed. And this is important. Your purpose doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be a public achievement. It just has to be real. Something you respect. Something you're committed to. Something that requires your growth. Because purpose gives structure to your attention. And attention is the currency of your life. A man who invests his attention into his development becomes naturally grounded. A man who throws his attention outward, trying to be approved, becomes anxious. You can feel the difference in his energy. One is steady, one is hungry. When you stop needing validation, your relationship with others changes. You listen better because you aren't secretly waiting for agreement. You speak more honestly because you aren't negotiating acceptance. You stop people pleasing because you're no longer afraid of losing what you don't require to survive. And that's when boundaries become natural. Not aggressive boundaries, not defensive boundaries, calm boundaries. Because when you aren't dependent, you don't have to control. You don't have to chase. You don't have to beg. You don't have to manipulate. You simply choose what aligns and step away from what doesn't. This is where attraction deepens, not through performance, through presence. People feel safer around someone who isn't silently asking them to fix an unfinished part of himself. They feel calmer around someone who doesn't bring hidden need into the room. They feel more open around someone who isn't trying to extract something. And here's why this matters right now more than ever. Modern dating has become highly performative. People sell curated versions of themselves. They show highlights, not reality. They learn therapy language before they learn emotional responsibility. They talk about healing while repeating the same patterns. They broadcast confidence while quietly starving for approval. In that environment, authenticity doesn't have to shout. It cuts through simply by existing. A self-sufficient man doesn't need to build a persona because his life already has coherence. What he shows aligns with how he lives, and that alignment is felt immediately, even when no one can explain why. That's why certain men feel rare, not because they're playing a role, but because they aren't. When someone isn't busy maintaining an image, the room relaxes. Conversations feel less transactional. There's no hidden agenda beneath every interaction. That creates psychological safety. And psychological safety is more attractive than flashy charm. People can feel when they're being evaluated or pursued for validation, and they can feel when they're being met. One creates resistance, the other creates curiosity. Self sufficiency also acts like a filter. People who are drawn to you only for status, convenience, access, or emotional dependency tend to fade when they realize there's nothing to extract. You offer connection, not rescue. You offer companionship, not compensation. That discourages takers and attracts builders. And what remains might be fewer connections, but the quality increases dramatically because self sufficiency removes urgency, it removes pressure, it removes desperation, it removes the subtle energy of please fill this gap in me. Superficial attraction thrives on urgency, comparison, scarcity, and fear of loss. Self sufficiency dissolves those dynamics. When you're not afraid of being alone, you stop rushing intimacy. When you're not measuring your worth through attention, you stop tolerating misalignment. When you're not chasing approval, you stop accepting inconsistency as normal. So the question becomes, how do you actually build this? Not as an idea, as a lived state. Because self-sufficiency can't be faked for long. People might not be able to articulate it, but they can feel when your confidence is a costume. They can feel when your calm is an act. They can feel when your indifference is actually insecurity disguised. Real self-sufficiency is built the hard way, through habits, through solitude, through discipline, through honest self-confrontation, through skill, through structure. To strengthen the foundation, a man has to learn to be alone without numbing himself. Most men aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of what silence reveals. The moment the distractions stop, the mind starts talking. The regrets, the weakness, the lack of direction, the pain you haven't faced, the parts of you you've been avoiding. So you keep the noise on. You keep the phone open. You keep the dopamine flowing. You keep the external input coming. And you call that being busy, but it's often avoidance. Constructive solitude is one of the fastest ways to build self-sufficiency because it forces you to confront your internal world without running. This doesn't have to be spiritual. It can be practical. Sit with yourself and notice how quickly you want distraction. Notice what feelings come up when no one is watching. Notice what thoughts you try to escape. That awareness is power because awareness creates space, and space gives you choice. This is what mindfulness actually is, not candles and slogans. Awareness and choice. When you can observe your thoughts instead of being dragged by them, you stop living reactively. You start living intentionally. You stop moving from impulse and start moving from values. And values matter because clarity is what prevents you from bending yourself to fit situations that drain you. A lot of men don't lack effort, they lack clarity. They don't lack motivation, they lack direction. They don't lack flexibility, they lack standards. So they keep sacrificing themselves to be liked. They keep adjusting themselves to keep attention. They keep tolerating what doesn't fit because they don't have a firm internal definition of what does. Introspection fixes that. What do you actually value? What do you refuse to tolerate? What kind of life are you building? What kind of relationship supports that life instead of sabotaging it? When you know the answers, you stop negotiating with your discomfort. Decisions become cleaner. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying. You stop begging for alignment. Your actions start reflecting priorities instead of insecurities. That's how real confidence forms. Consistency between what you say, what you do, and what you tolerate. Oh. Competence is another pillar that makes self sufficiency real. Because self sufficiency isn't just emotional, it's functional. It's the belief, built through evidence, that you can rely on yourself. When you develop valuable skills, physical, intellectual, practical, you gain agency. Mastery creates proof. Proof creates calm. A man who knows he can handle life doesn't need constant reassurance. He doesn't need to prove himself in every room. He already has internal receipts. Competence changes your posture. It changes your voice. It changes your pace. Not because you're trying, but because your nervous system isn't operating from doubt. Financial stability also matters here, and it needs to be framed correctly. This isn't about flashy money. It's about reducing desperation and increasing choice. When your basic needs are handled, you stop making emotional decisions out of fear. You stop tolerating disrespect because you feel trapped. You stop clinging to unhealthy dynamics because you're terrified of losing comfort. Financial discipline doesn't make you better, it makes you free. And freedom stabilizes your emotional world more than most men want to admit. When these elements start stacking, solitude, self awareness, competence, stability, purpose, you feel fortified. Not hardened, fortified. And from that place, your relationships become lighter and cleaner. You can give without depletion. You can receive without attachment. You can care without clinging. Then something interesting happens. Your presence starts shaping the dynamics around you. The first change isn't that you get more attention, it's that you get different attention. You attract fewer interactions built on impulse and insecurity. The connections that form tend to move slower and with more intention. Less testing, less drama, less performance. People show up more honestly because they can feel you're not playing for validation. And because you aren't bringing urgency into the room, others stop feeling pressured to perform. Silence becomes comfortable instead of awkward. Conversations deepen because no one is trying to win. Emotional exchanges carry more weight because they aren't being traded like currency. Respect begins to show up naturally. Not respect you demand, respect you evoke. Because people respect men who respect themselves. And self respect is mostly visible through what you allow and what you refuse. When your boundaries are calm and consistent, they get challenged less. When your words match your actions, people take you seriously. And here's a big one: rejection stops destroying you. Because rejection only ruins men who are using women to confirm their identity. When your identity is rooted in your life, disinterest becomes information, not humiliation. You adjust course without self hate. You don't chase closure. You don't beg to be chosen. You don't take it personally as proof you're not enough. That emotional neutrality is often misunderstood as detachment. But it's not detachment, it's maturity. You can care without collapsing when things don't go your way. Self sufficiency also changes how you express interest. You become direct but unpressured. You don't manipulate. You don't overextend. You don't turn attraction into an audition. When it's mutual, it unfolds naturally. When it's not, you step back cleanly. That creates a kind of emotional hygiene that most people aren't used to, and they feel it immediately. Not because you're playing it cool, but because you aren't dependent on the outcome. Your confidence becomes quieter and more durable. You stop needing emotional highs to feel alive. You stop needing romantic tension to feel valuable. You stop needing constant contact to feel secure. Solitude becomes a reset, not a punishment. Being alone stops feeling like a void and starts feeling like an advantage because it reconnects you with yourself. And over time, you become versatile in a way that's rare, comfortable in motion and stillness, in company and in silence. That internal order becomes your signature. Then the final shift happens. You stop treating attraction like something to chase or engineer, and you start seeing it for what it always was, a byproduct of alignment. Most men waste years trying to create reactions instead of building substance. They chase the echo instead of building the voice. They optimize for attention instead of coherence. Self sufficiency rearranges your priorities in a way that feels both grounding and freeing. Time stops being structured around anticipation and emotional negotiation. It gets invested into refinement. You become more selective, not because you're arrogant, but because you respect your bandwidth. You stop offering full access to people who bring confusion, inconsistency, or drain. You stop tolerating misalignment to avoid loneliness. You stop scanning rooms for confirmation. You start evaluating alignment. And that reverses the entire dynamic. You're no longer auditioning for intimacy, you're curating it. From that place, peace becomes your baseline. Whether alone or accompanied, you remain intact. Whether admired or overlooked, you remain grounded. This doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you discerning. You can care deeply without clinging. You can love without losing yourself. You can desire without chasing. You can connect without negotiating your worth. That balance is real magnetism, not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the kind that lasts. And now we land on the simplest truth in all of this. Attraction was never about tactics, image, or persuasion. It was never something you extract from others through effort and optimization. It rises naturally when a man is internally aligned, emotionally regulated, and rooted in a life he respects. The moment you stop trying to be chosen and start becoming aligned, your presence changes. You stop broadcasting need and start transmitting stability. Others feel it before they can explain it. They sense you're not asking them to fill a gap, prove your worth, or rescue you from emptiness. You're inviting them into a life that already stands. That's why chasing attraction kills it. Chasing communicates lack, even when you hide it behind confidence. Becoming communicates depth. When your days are shaped by purpose, your emotions governed by awareness, and your boundaries built from self-respect, attraction responds almost automatically, not explosively, not dramatically, steadily. The kind that stays. The real upgrade isn't that more people want you. It's that you no longer need them to. And that's the point, because the strongest form of confidence is not being admired, it's being rooted. You stop measuring yourself by reactions. You stop confusing attention with connection. You stop mistaking being desired for being respected. Instead, you build coherence. An attraction becomes the echo of who you are, not the goal you chase. That's what self-sufficiency really is. Not isolation, freedom.